This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today we have Samantha Francis, who is a parenting and relationship expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
So give us a little bit of an introduction as to why you chose to specialize in parenting and relationships.
Well, basically, I started off my business with holistic health and being a holistic therapist. At the time of doing that and prior to doing that, I was going through a very hard period of my life where I'd left a very long relationship that was very violent. I'd left it with my child. So we were kind of in the process of picking up the pieces and going through our own healing journey as well. And I noticed that a lot of the clients that I was attracting, because I am a Reiki master as well, they were very much like myself. They were mums that felt very lost, very disconnected with their child, didn't know how to create that loving, warm, secure relationship with their child. And it was affecting them in so many different ways. It was affecting their work. It was affecting how they showed up with family and friends. It was just always there in the background. And they would come to me, I guess, trying to de-stress and realign so they could feel better. But the problem was still there lurking in the background. Now, at that point where I had recovered enough to bring my family back together, and I'd gone through that journey myself, in terms of healing and helping my child to do that. And I had experienced massive disconnection with my own child because, I had postnatal depression. As I say, I was in a violent relationship. I was incredibly ill after I had my child. So I understood what it felt like to feel like you should be feeling something and you should be having this kind of relationship, but you just can't, no matter what you're trying. So it went from me giving treatments and therapies to talking therapies and working on mindset and belief systems and everything. And then I had simultaneously brought out my first book that was a dedication to my daughter, and was a reflection of our journey after leaving that part of our life and moving forward. It wasn't until then that some of the mums came and said to me, why does nobody know what you can do? And I was a bit kind of confused at that point. I thought, yes, they do. I'm a therapist. It's what I do. I said, no, you do something else you do, because the things I was saying to them, the advice I was giving, the work I was doing with them was getting them results. So they said to me, you need to put this book out there, get it out there, show more mums, because I promise you, if you can resonate with it, if they can resonate, there are families there that need the book. So I did that. And then I came out of the closet as a parenting coach as such. And it's something that just means a lot to me, because I can understand their pain. I can understand what it feels like to see your child in front of you, know that you love your child, but you just can't access that deep connection, that depth of love, seeing it on social media, seeing it in the in society. You're a mum, you're supposed to love your child, you're supposed to feel a certain way. And I just thought, well, what about the mums that don't and that can't? Who is there to help them? Are they supposed to stay there and just feel not good enough and just feel worthless, like they're not real mums? And what about the children that want that connection with their mother, something that's supposed to be so natural, and they can't get it, and then it's impacting their self-worth? And I just wanted to step in and say, listen, it doesn't have to be that way. I've gone through it, I've overcome it. We can bring it together. There is always a way forward. And I firmly believe that. I just believe that whatever fractures or disconnections there are, with the right support, you can bring things back together. And, it just leads to increased mental health, increased positivity within the home. Your child is growing up confident, secure, high self-worth, because mum is leading first. So that's my passion. I just love it.
And you can tell that passion's coming through, because when you think about the kind of parenting experts, there's a lot on education So
Yeah.
the kind of educational style, so teaching your children how to learn things. And there's lots on discipline. So if you kind of think of, the super nanny type of
Yeah.
model of how parents can be equipped to, let's say manage tantrums and things like that. But there isn't a lot talked about on the emotional connection
Yeah.
between, let's say, mum and child, parent and child. Is that because there is this narrative in culture that there is this maternal instinct, there is this unbreakable bond between mum and child, and therefore mums don't need to be taught this stuff? It's known. Do you think that's part of the reason why there isn't a lot out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's this expectation that when you give birth to a child, when you are given the title of mother, you're meant to just know. You're meant to just have this connection that miraculously appears. And therefore, you can do the whole, what do I do if my child's throwing a tantrum? You follow the instructions, the strategy almost, because you should have the connection in place. But what happens when the mother doesn't have that connection? The strategy or kind of dealing with the symptoms of what the root problem is doesn't work. You
Mm.
have to have a balance there. You have to make sure that the core, the foundation of the connection piece is in place before you go and offer, well, in my perspective, before you go and offer the strategy of what to do if they're not listening, or how, what do you do if they're struggling with anxiety. These are things I teach, but one of the things I look at first and foremost is the connection piece. How is mum showing up? How is mum feeling when she is acting or doing certain things with the child? Because how you feel within yourself will show up in your parenting, it will show up in your relationships, it shows up everywhere. There's a difference to, if with a mum with really low self-worth that just doesn't feel that she can do anything right, and how she speaks to her child, compared to the mother that feels absolutely high on confidence, self-worth, life is great. She has a fabulous relationship with herself, and how she speaks to her child in that way. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So therefore you will get different results, if that makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
it totally makes sense. And I guess also, there is a different rule between, let's say, parents and children. In a romantic relationship, if you don't feel that connection, quite often that relationship will end. But you
Yeah.
can't end a relationship with a child. That's a lifelong commitment. So from that perspective, if someone isn't feeling the connection, but they feel like they're just going through the motions, I guess that puts a huge amount of kind of pressure, stress, but I would assume also guilt. I mean, to what
Yeah.
extent does guilt play a role in the lack of connection between a parent and a child?
Absolutely. If you feel like there's a disconnection there, and you get all sorts of thoughts that turn into feelings such as guilt. And that guilt only creates more disconnection, because think about it, how do we behave when we feel guilt? What other thoughts and feelings come in and attach themselves to that? And again, that shows up with how we feel about ourselves, and then how we show up as parents. People don't understand parenting until you're actually parents, as to how, like you say, how difficult it can be. It's not necessarily an easy ride, but especially when you have things as a parent that you're already holding within yourself, such as trauma, low self-worth, low confidence, all of those things actively playing out as well. It just makes the whole experience a lot harder. Um, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm. What are the clues? Because I guess ignorance is one of the issues there, that you don't know something if you don't know something. So if someone is maybe listening right now and they don't know that there might be a lack of connection between them and their child, what are the clues or the signals that there might be something not quite right there?
So 9 times out of 10, it will just be through the child's behavior that they'll see it. So they may find that the child has high anxiety. They may find that the child's just not listening to them. They may find that the child is being very, or communicating in a way that they perceive to be very disrespectful to them. They may just find that the child is just not interested. in spending time connecting when the parent does want to connect. And it shows up in their behavior. A lot of children, they can't comprehend their emotions the way we can. So they will often physically show it through potentially, I don't like the word tantrums, but I'll just use it anyway because everyone uses it, tantrums, or physically lashing out if there's violence coming from that child, aggression, or if the child has just gone completely inwards and they just will not open up. Those are a lot of the common telltale signs.
Because I think a lot of parents have an overall belief that respect is expected. So the child should respect the parent, the adult. But equally, I guess there isn't a cultural expectation that love is also an expectation.
Yeah.
So sometimes I guess if there is a lack of connection or love from parent to child, then that may also create a law of reciprocity. There's a lack of that love and connection coming back, or maybe a lack of respect that comes back as well.
Absolutely. One of the core things that I teach my clients is the mirror. The mirror is always there, whether you like it or not. If your child is showing you something through their behavior or through how they communicate to you, it is showing you something about yourself and about the connection that you are having with your child. So often when parents come to me and they said, oh, he or she's doing this and then they're doing that, and no matter what I try, it's not working, they're still doing these things. That's where I know there is a connection piece that has been missed by the parent. And that's where I go in. I say, okay, what are we being shown? What is being shown back to you here? Because you're being given an opportunity to heal whatever's been disconnected here. Your child is showing you what needs to heal. So that mirror is always there.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I guess communication has such an important role to play, because if I'm just thinking, like, for people that I know, maybe like, distant family members, I don't see them very often. But, they are family, but you don't really feel a connection. So when you communicate, you're communicating in a different way than if it's a family member that you really want to spend time with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To what extent are people aware of the way in which they communicate that can give clues as to how strong that connection is?
I feel like we all have an internal dialogue going on, and we all have different lenses. So we all see things differently, and therefore we will communicate differently as well. With a lot of parents, I do a lot of work with the inner child as well, because the inner child often is playing out, and that affects their communication and their dialogue with whoever it is they're coming into interaction with. When it comes to their parenting, a lot of parents, there's this common thing that's always said, like, oh, he or she's pushing my buttons, and and I say, yeah, you're being triggered. What's coming up with that? Oh no, he or she needs to stop doing that. And they can come across in a way where they communicate a little bit aggressively, a little bit harshly, like, stop doing that, stop triggering me. And I always say again, like, these are opportunities for you to heal, for you to address something within yourself, so that you don't have buttons that people can push, so that you're not coming from a reactive, wounded state. You're responding from an aligned place of loving boundaries. But I think with a lot of adults as well, and I'll hold my hands up, this was me as well, a lot of us grew up not really understanding what loving boundaries are, with close relatives or friends or distant relatives. We will communicate differently based on our internal lens, but also it comes down to, us knowing who we are, us knowing our standards, and us knowing our values for ourselves as well.
Mm. Yeah, it is. It is kind of interesting in terms of the presuppositions that are in there, because if someone is easily triggered, children are
Yeah,
very good at figuring out how to get certain reactions,
absolutely.
from parents. And if there is a lack of attention coming from a parent, perhaps because there is a lack of connection, and for them, they know they can push buttons and they're getting the attention, even if that attention is shouting, screaming, a parent getting cross. well, that's still attention, which is better than nothing.
Absolutely.
So you're right, there is an element of a mirror there, because sometimes the child's behavior is going to be a reflection of their need that isn't being met in a
Yeah.
different way. um, what are some of the ways in which parents can, once they become aware of it, because I guess awareness is one of the key things, they're aware of their language, they're aware of the dynamic going on, what can they do to change either the level of connection or some of their communication strategies to minimize disconnection?
So the first thing I always say with any situation is, if you spot the disconnection, if you feel like, right, I've tried everything else to kind of relieve the symptoms, it's not working, there has to be something else that I'm missing, is to go inwards first. So with a lot of my clients, I make sure that though I'm guiding them with their child in terms of the behavior and the dynamics within the connection, I'm also alongside of that making sure that they're seeing to their own needs first as well, and that they're placing that as a priority. A burnt out mum, I promise you, will not show up as her best self, and therefore will create more and more disconnection, especially if she's resenting the fact that she hasn't got time for herself, and that she, she has to do all the time, and she's exhausted. She will communicate in ways that maybe are not that positive for her or her child. So it's about making sure that you're taking care of your needs first. Like I say this all the time, we lead first. Our children are watching us, they're feeling our energies, they're learning how to be from us. And that's not to say if you're having a bad day, you hide it from your child or anything like that, because your children, they see and feel everything. They know when something's off. They know when mum's not in a good place. They know when mum is in a good place. You can be open and articulate about, yeah, mum's not feeling great today, but here's what I'm going to do to cheer myself up. You're teaching your child around emotional awareness, and you're teaching your child, to what they can do if they do feel down, or you can kind of find something to make you feel better, even if it's taking a nap or doing some drawing or whatever. But essentially, a lot of the time when there is disconnection in a relationship and between you and your child, there is a disconnection within yourself first.
Mm.
Okay, so I would always recommend kind of looking at that first and seeking help or support with that, alongside with what you're doing with your child. In terms of communication, I think the biggest tip that I could give is, when you are communicating, and this connects in with the first tip, but when you are communicating, try to be aware about responding and reacting. A lot of the time as parents, I'll hold my hands up with it as well, we can come from a reactive space if we're tired, if we're in a rush, if we've got loads of stuff to do and we just haven't got time for this tantrum today, and we communicate in a way that actually makes the situation worse. So I have a lot of parents that come to me around the whole tantrum problem and the terrible twos. And, when I hear what they do, because I go through the different steps with them, I say, right, what do you say to this? And what happens? When 9 times out of 10, when I hear back what they've said, I can understand why the child has reacted back. And then it's escalated into an hour-long tantrum. So it's about, again, making sure that you're in the best space that you can be in. No parent is ever, peace and light every single day. It's not possible. But if you can get yourself into the routine of being in that space, so that when things do happen, which they will, you can know that you're coming from a space of responding instead of reacting. Reacting just leads to escalation, and it leads to making things that could be tidied up a lot quicker into something a lot bigger, and it doesn't have to be. Triggers is a big one.
Mm.
It is a big one.
Yeah, because these little triggers can easily create a chain of events where things do escalate very
Yeah,
rapidly. And when things, escalate or kind of amplify, things are said that aren't necessarily meant, but then can also increase that feeling of disconnection.
yeah,
How would a parent deal with, let's say, a child that maybe says something hurtful or mean while they are in that kind of heightened emotional state?
yeah.
How do they process that in a way that doesn't contribute to a feeling of disconnection?
So a lot of the time the child may react and say something along the lines of, I hate you, I wish you were dead, I wish you weren't my mum, you know, in the moment. And a lot of times parents want to, they want to shout back. They want to say, how dare you talk to me like that? You know, and come in with that energy and that communication. When a child comes at you, and that's what it feels like, the child is coming at you. When the child communicates with you in that way, your best bet is to just state what you see and hear. That puts you in a responsive state. I can see you're really angry right now. I can hear how angry you are in your words. I love you. I'm here to help you. It's safe and it's okay. That instantly, even if it doesn't instantly stop the tantrum or the outburst, it just brings a level of calm down. And we have to remind ourselves as parents, you know, kids will say all sorts, you know, and we will think all sorts as well about our children when we're in a reactive state as well. But the truth of the matter is your child loves you so much. And again, they just want to feel loved and safe and connected with you. So staying in a responsive space and being the adult in the situation. And this is what I meant earlier when I said about a lot of parents having a lot of inner child stuff playing out as well, because often in those situations, the inner child will react and communicate from the space of the inner child. So if we can bring awareness to that and just remember always that we are the parent, we are the leaders, we're the adults, we are able to process our emotions in a way that our child cannot, then we can support ourselves in placing ourselves in a responsive state.
And it's acknowledging and validating that they are, in whatever emotional state, but that you do care, I guess, is a good way to kind of bring down the de-escalation. Let's say, because up to this point, the main dynamic that I've been picturing in my head is kind of one parent, one child. Let's say that there's a parent with maybe 2 or 3 children, so they have siblings. How do they handle a situation where they might have a really strong connection with one of the children and it just doesn't feel that way for another one of the children? Because that can, I guess, quite possibly create a feeling of a lack of fairness, from the child's perspective, which could lead to anger, and at the same time guilt from the parent. So how does that dynamic play out in your experience?
Well, personally, I've experienced that myself because I've got 2 girls. And I can say for myself, what I did was I could instantly feel there was a different connection with each child, but she was aware of that as well. That was my eldest. So that did build up to resentment of her sister and anger and lashing out at myself. So what I did to heal and resolve that, and what I often recommend to parents as well, depending on their situation, is creating one-to-one time with that child so you can get to know each other and build that connection, because the connection and the relationship you have with one child is never going to be the same with the other, because you've got 2 different people in front of you. You've got 2 different personalities, 2 different energies in front of you as well. So the connection, it's good to know that the connection will always be different, but if there is a feeling of disconnection, like you can just feel it there as well, I always recommend spending more time together alongside with the parent working through their stuff as well. Building that relationship with your child, getting to know them, getting to know their strengths, what they like, having fun together, and creating that connection will let that child realize that, yes, it's okay to have different relationships, but I can still be secure in my connection with my mum or my dad as well.
You mentioned that you were in an abusive relationship, that you left that relationship with your child. Do you ever find when you're coaching parents, particularly mums, that if they have left, let's say, an unpleasant relationship, but they're still with that child, obviously that child shares 50% of the genetics with the person that they had an issue with. Do you ever find that some of the physical or personality traits of the former partner can actually contribute to a feeling of disconnection because they just remind them of someone that they have bad emotions with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's really a tricky one, especially when you've recently left that relationship as well, and you're just wanting to close the door on it. And then all of a sudden, your child is starting to look like your former partner or doing things in a very similar way. And you think, oh my God, again, it's the triggering. It's the triggering. And this is why it's so important that you can separate that and you can recognize that actually I'm being triggered. This is my stuff. Of course, my child may look like my ex-partner. Of course, they may have traits, but they're not them. That's the difference. And it really depends on where you are with your healing journey as well, like on what stage you're at. You know, you can be in a space where, like I say, you've just left, you're still feeling traumatized by everything. And yeah, your child is triggering you and it creates that disconnection. But once you bring awareness to the fact that you can separate that your child is not the person that hurt you, your child is not the person that contributed to the trauma, they are their own unique beings and they need your love and attention and support because they've gone through it too, you know, then you're in a better pathway there. I mean, my daughter looks exactly like my ex-partner, you know, and she's got a lot of his traits. And I think with a lot of parents, they often want to kind of say, well, you're just like your dad or you're just like your mum, you know, when these things happen. And there have been times where I've thought of that myself and I've kept it zipped, you know, because I've had to always bring awareness to the fact that she's not him. She's her own person. But yeah, it's really common.
Mm. And I imagine a difficult kind of thing, particularly if there are, let's say, different fathers of the child, then that's going to create different emotional kind of reminders
Yeah.
at some level. If someone's listening right now and they acknowledge that maybe there is a bit of a disconnect between them and their child, what would be your top tips to improve the level of connection, to immediately take it in a more positive direction?
So, okay, so number one, I would say definitely look into yourself, see where there's maybe some stuff playing out within you that maybe needs healing. Because a lot of the time with our children and the relationship we have with our children, they are mirroring back some stuff from our own childhood as well. So I would say look into that and get support with that. I would say create time for one-to-one interaction with your child as well. So I like to call it for myself, mummy and me time. Okay, so I would have a section of time in the week where phones are down, all interaction is off, and it's just solely myself and my child, spending time together, doing whatever they choose to do, and just having fun with each other, getting to know each other, and being regular with that. So that that was something that I would schedule in my diary every week, you know, and I would place that as a priority, just like I would do paying bills or, you know, working out or all the other priorities in our life, because sometimes it can slip. Sometimes we can get through everything we need to do in the day and we're just absolutely exhausted by the evening time. And then you just think, okay, I'll move it to tomorrow, you know, we'll spend time together tomorrow. And when a child feels like they can't spend time with you at a time where they thought they were going to spend time with you, it can be very disappointing and it can reinforce this feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not important. So I schedule in time. I recommend my clients schedule in time to have that one-to-one time if you can. Obviously, if you're a single parent, it can be difficult, but it's not impossible. There are always ways to kind of work around things. Asking your child things like, you know, how are you today? You know, how are your friends doing? Like, I sit down with my girls and we chat about their friends, we chat about what's going on in school, you know, the dynamics with their friendships and things like that, and just having open conversations, because through that as well, you're actually getting to know your child, getting to know how they cope with certain situations, how they deal with conflict, how they deal with making new friends and things. It's easier then for you to kind of potentially spot where there may be an issue going on that maybe you need to step in with, or maybe you conversate with your child and you look and you think, wow, they're handling life really, really well. But through conversation, you get to know people, right? Because if we were dating or getting into a relationship with somebody, we'd be conversating to get to know that person, to see if what that person's about, if they're a good fit for us, you know? So one-to-one time, conversating in general, doing activities together as much as you can as a family as well, to bring things together as well, especially if there's been resentment between one child and another. And having fun with your child, because children connect and they learn through play, more so than anything else. And yeah, I think a lot of the time, especially as parents, we're so busy, we're tired, we've got so much to do, we forget play and we forget to have fun. So on the weekends in our house, we plan ahead. We say, right, we're having a movie night on Saturday night. We're going to do some games on Sunday, just anything that they feel like they want to do with you, because they want to do everything with you anyway, but just get them to pick, get them to feel like they're part of the process. So those are the easiest things that you can do. Doesn't cost money, not a huge amount of effort there, and it creates really good connection.
This year has been a strange year, particularly for children, because for most of the world, let alone the UK, schools were shut down for several months at a time where they weren't normally shut down. So there was probably more parent-child time than ever before. What are some of the things that are perhaps challenges or difficulties that you've noticed with your clients that came up during that time, and how could they be repaired or resolved, do you think?
So a lot of it was to do with a lot of the mums that I was working with, where they were saying to me, everything has just kind of hit them in one go. Like the whole thing with this year has been unexpected. Nobody knew what was going to happen. You know, nobody knew the lockdown was really coming. So when it did happen, it was just like, oh my goodness, now I'm having to juggle being a mum, juggle homeschooling, juggle work, if they're working from home, everything on their plates. And a lot of the mums, they waved the white flag with certain areas such as homeschooling and things like that, because they couldn't manage everything. So stress was a biggie for my clients this year. And yes, they had to let go of certain things to ease the load off of them. And then, but the thing is as well, what we have to remember is that our children were also feeling and are feeling a very similar way. They're unsure. They don't know what's going to happen. So what I did with clients this year was I worked more so on their stress levels, on aligning them to feel like they are in a more responsive state. So when they're having potential issues with their children, they were able to kind of bring it back together in a calmer and more peaceful way than they would have done if they were highly stressed out and in a reactive state. So a lot of the feedback was, oh, we're just arguing and fighting, we're under each other's feet all the time now. I don't want to be around him. I don't want to be around her. It's just too much. So it would be about kind of looking at that situation and going, right, okay, we all love each other. We don't hate each other, but what can we do to make this situation easier for all of us, and creating their own unique plan of action. And that would have, it would have included things such as one-to-one time, but it also would have included things as kind of separating off throughout the day to do your own thing for yourself as well. Because even kids need their own space. They don't need to be around parents 24/7. It's not great for their development, and it's really not great for the parent as well, because they feel absolutely overwhelmed with it all. So I think now that we're in the second lockdown as well, I think parents have learned a lot from the first lockdown in terms of how to deal with things, how to create space and time to manage all of the responsibilities they have now, and more importantly, their stress levels.
Fantastic. Some great advice there. If someone's listening right now and they want to kind of tap into your expertise, maybe reach out and get some coaching or guidance from you, what's the best way they can learn more about you and connect with you?
So you can find me on Facebook if you just put in Samantha Francis author, and it will come up with Positive Parenting and Relationships. You can find me at www.samanthafrancispositiveparenting.co.uk. You can find me on Instagram, Samantha Francis Parenting. And yeah, just feel free to connect. I'm happy to answer any questions or offer any support if anyone needs any.
Fantastic. Samantha, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.